What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Comic Breakdown. In this video, we are jumping into X-Men Red. This will be issue number 13. Not only that, but this is the final X-Men title before the fall of X, before the Hellfire Gala of 2023. Now in this issue, if you're expecting some kind of huge action-packed scenes, that's not gonna happen. But that doesn't mean that this comic isn't phenomenal, because the dialogue that happens inside of this comic has me so excited to see what is coming next. We had last left off with John Ironfire making his arrival to Arakko, carrying the white sword Purity. He came to the Great Ring. He came to let them all know Genesis is on her way. She carries the Annihilation Staff, and war travels with her. So make sure you guys have subscribed to the channel, make sure that you like this video, and with that being said, let's dive into this breakdown. Alright gang, so we're gonna dive into this issue, and I'm actually really excited for it, because X-Men Red seems to be the only title that is hugely focused on all the Arakko mutants. And so our story starts us off at the Great Ring. The first mutant that we are introduced to is Lycan the Balanced One, holder of the seat of stalemate, the voice of cool thought and noble compromise, the both-sided one. As he makes his introduction, we see that Lotus throws a knife right at his head, definitely not being the first newcomer that Lotus has tested. Storm tells him to simply calm down, sit down so we can have this talk, with Kobach chiming in, letting it be known that there are definitely more pressing issues. That right now, they are only 8. They are still missing their seat of dreams. But the more pressing issue is John Ironfire, first of the Sword's 100. He has come to the Great Ring today to let them know that Genesis is coming. The White Sword giving John Ironfire Purity as a sign, knowing that if the enemy gets this weapon, that it would be the end. And the enemy he speaks of is the Annihilation Force. While many believe the helm had been destroyed, the helm has turned into a staff. And while the power is much more subtle, he also believes it to be more potent. But before he can say who has the staff, we see a stranger on the horizon, alone with no army and no horsemen. This is where we have the arrival of Genesis, all of them bearing witness to her carrying the Staff of Annihilation, arriving to the Great Ring, surprised that this is the welcome she gets, a desert of bones. The Great Ring lessened, even going as far as saying that if she was weak enough for tears, she would be shedding them at how far Arakko has fallen. When the Annihilation Staff also says Arakko has fallen, Aura and some of the others, they take note of this, asking if that thing or somebody else had spoken, but Genesis kinda brushed this off. She changes the subject to John Ironfire, asking why would you allow such a madman to be in this space, that this offends Genesis. And while many believe that he seemed very coherent, the way Genesis sees it, he comes from the White Sword. Death is their daily sacrament. Rebirth is their nightly religion. These are not sane people. Genesis is saying that of course they would try to stir up a civil war between them. By all appearances, it looks like Genesis is trying to keep her civil war on the down low. She's trying to make sure that nobody is privy to the information that she might have. That John Ironfire just must be lying. That she comes with no army. She doesn't come as a conqueror. She is simply saying that she is here to check in on Arakko, as she continues on really trying to kill the character of John Ironfire, saying that in his delirium, this man who escaped the Hundred's asylum, he even considers the nobility of Arakko as equal to demons. But the way John Ironfire sees it, the demons turned up to fight when Genesis never came, with John Ironfire going on to say that none of you understand fully what the Ivory Spire was. It was a spire built from their very bones, as they died time and time again for 100, for 1,000 years. They were the front line. They were the first wave. Genesis and her forces, they were meant to be the second. They were meant to be the reinforcements. And so yes, they died every day because they were left to die, asking Genesis, where were you? With Genesis pausing for a moment and then addressing the Great Ring, saying that this grubby little nobody is allowed to address all of you. That can you not hear him begging for help? Using some power, we see the vines from the ground, they grab hold of John Ironfire, restricting his movement, not allowing him to speak. Hearing enough from John, she wants to hear from the rest of the Great Ring, Sobanar being the first one. And once the word help for Arakko had meant something different, today there is no shame in the word help, in the word of reinforcements. But with the Annihilation Staff, these ideas of change, they seem to be getting suppressed. The way Genesis sees it, the old ways are the only way. The strong survive. The simplest of concepts. That their mutant weapons, this is what defines them. Their feats of power place them in a glorious hierarchy. But as she goes on this little rant, that is where Storm finally interjects, asking, is this really what we are? Is that what you fought for? Through the millennia, when you stood against the forces of annihilation, just so that you could hold the same power in your own hand. Is this really all that we can be? The way that Genesis sees it, this time of peace, this was a time of opportunity, a time to fortify themselves, to fortify the earth, to teach the world, one which they believe they coddled for far too long with their sacrifices, to teach them to stand on their own feet. But instead, under the influence of Storm, Arakko fled. They have grown fat and complacent, a world of luxuries, and they have now paid a very dear price, saying that for the seed of loss, you ask a lot of questions. But Genesis only has one. Who is this we? While the true Araki fought and died, they did so against the demons of Ameth and the Eternals of Earth. The question is, where were you? With Lycan saying that she is speaking wisdom, that the newcomer has led them into error. But Kobak does interject, saying that he will not hear this slander, that he has faced Storm in the Circle Perilous. She prevailed. She was instrumental in caging Uranos. But Genesis says that they didn't kill him, which is what they should have done. And if Storm really wanted the respect, she would have finished him off alone. Instead, she leaned on humans and dying old men. And she also will not take the personal endorsement of her brave character from someone who wept like a child over a single death. With Storm saying enough, we see the crack of lightning come down. The Annihilation Staff says miss, and the bolt of lightning does. And Genesis goes on to say enough indeed, that a crying child now sits in her seat, that this is an insult against her, one she will not tolerate. And so, she challenges Kobak, and Kobak accepts. Here and now, let this be the circle. These be the witnesses. Let none interfere. With the Annihilation Staff saying that he will lose and he will die. This is where we see John Ironfire breaking free of the hold that is on him, telling Kobak to stand down, because he claims a prior challenge. He was here first by 1,000 years, breaking free, grabbing hold of purity, screaming for the 100. He goes to strike Genesis, and the Annihilation Staff says miss again, and John Ironfire, he misses with his slash. With him missing, Genesis is able to make moves, and she grabs hold of purity, saying that non-mutant weapons are allowed in a challenge, and Purity, the ivory blade, that is hers. Now Storm goes to interject and say that she won't allow this, but the Annihilation Staff saying that Genesis is right. We see Sobanar hit Storm, telling Storm that you will not sully our most sacred of traditions, that she has blinded them with her honeyed words for long enough. And so he challenges Storm. Storm going on to ask, do you truly want to rule by the strong? Do you want a world without mercy or pity? Because if this is the world that you want, then she will more than willingly show you this world. and Lotus turning to Loktuka. Loktuka knows all things, and Loktuka should know that this is wrong. Loktuka saying maybe and maybe not, but what is it to him? Lotus goes on to say that Genesis wants to shape Arakko's soul in her image, but she has lost that right. She wore the helm, and she failed Arakko. Now she wants to own them. Lotus calls this a challenge to all of them, and so they must answer it, but not by her rules, on their own rules. With Loktuka going on to say the stars, they move still. What is a world to him? And yet, the staff tips the scales with its whispers, and so he wants to tip them back. To be strong is to survive, says Genesis. And the rebels of Arakko, they survive. This is where we see half of the Great Ring. They simply disappear. Lotus, Storm, John Ironfire, Kobak, all of these people, they just vanish. Genesis says that they ran, and Aura chiming in saying that she doesn't believe that that can be really called running. Loktuka committed an insult by interfering, and so Genesis should take this as a challenge. And right here, this is my favorite part of the whole comic. Loktuka tells Genesis that you could, if you wanted to, you could challenge me. Genesis glancing over at Loktuka, she says nothing. The Annihilation Staff says that they ran, and so Genesis turns her back, and she says that they ran. She knows what she saw. She saw weakness displayed as cowardice, and the days of being coddled, those days are gone. The rightful rule has returned, and when the true mutants of Arakko march to war, it will be under the banner of Genesis. And that is the end of this issue. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. This was a hugely political issue. The Great Ring politics really finally getting some light on it. Now, what we just saw was really Genesis going out there trying to claim her seat on the Great Ring. By doing so, she believed that she could manipulate things from the inside. But what she didn't realize is that Arakko has changed. The Great Ring has changed. While Storm may have not been there for a millennia, Storm has been there recently. She fought against the Eternals. She has been here to help Arakko every step of the way, to help show them the new way, that show them war is not always the answer, that peace can be achieved, and that we can have prosperity. Obviously, Genesis doesn't like this. The way that she sees it, they cannot be superior. They cannot be better if no one is below them. And instead of showing the Earth what they are truly capable of, they show restraint. They show mercy. And it has come at the lives of many, many mutants. But more than that, the Annihilation Staff, it really is manipulating the situation. The weaker individuals on the Great Ring, they succumb to it. It's almost as if it nudges them in the direction that it wants it to go. But Genesis did walk away with purity. That was the whole purpose of John Ironfire running away with the sword, is to keep it out of her hands. And now she has it. She wields that weapon. And Loktuka knew, Lotus knew, that if they were to fight Genesis this day, the Great Ring, it would have been severely damaged. Many of the members fighting against one another. This would have only caused more division and allowed Genesis to really implement her rule. But with Loktuka's interference, we don't know where he sent them. But at least for the time being, these individuals are safe. And we have to assume that they will be instrumental in whatever comes next. But my favorite part of all of this is Aura saying that Loktuka was essentially challenging Genesis. And Genesis, even with the Annihilation Staff, has the opportunity to challenge Loktuka and doesn't do it. Now, we have yet to see Loktuka fully use their power. But with Genesis' hesitation here, we have to assume that the power is beyond what Genesis could do. And she's wielding the Annihilation Staff. Now, don't get me wrong, Genesis could win this fight, but it really seems like Genesis doesn't want to take that chance. That fighting against Loktuka could end all of it right here and right now. And so I am very interested in seeing how this is going to play out. I really hope that Laktuka gets a bigger opportunity and a bigger spotlight as we prepare for this civil war. But the stage has been set. Fall of X starts next week. The Hellfire Gala kicking it all off. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your theories. If you would like to get completely caught up to everything currently going on, there is a video I have patched together with everything you need to know exactly where you're standing when it comes to the X-Men titles. It'll bring you directly into everything going on with the Hellfire Gala ever since Sins of Sinister. So be sure to check out that link in my description as well as the top of this video. If you would like to support the channel, you can always do so by joining the channel membership, much like Patreon, having multiple different tiers, from $1 to $50. From loyalty badges to comics every single month. Not only are you helping out the channel tremendously, but you are getting tons of perks in the process. If you are unable to do this, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like this video, hit that notification bell, and with that being said, until the next breakdown.